there is a level of intellect and the level of intuition. You must listen and understand the first. You must feel and experience the second. Your job is to balance the two so that blending, understanding, and experience transports you to a whole new level of knowing. Last week, we explored that the universe is connected. We talked about how we're in this unified web of, this whole unbroken wholeness, shall we say. And that this universe that we're in it's alive, it's intelligent, it's conscious, and that consciousness is actually everywhere. So when you hear the words, and I'm going to bring many of the words in today from that song, the Pocahontas song, you hear every rock and tree and creature has a life, has a spirit, has a name. And so this universal intelligence, it has wisdom. It has divine wisdom. And we can, when we access this particular kind of wisdom that's unlike any other, when we access it, we tend to lead a more meaningful life, a more purposeful life, and we actually lead a more prosperous life. So, wouldn't it be wonderful if all of life prospered, like all of it prospered? Okay, good. We got a couple of yeses in the house. That's good. Well, in our global vision, one of the statements that we hold very dear in this global vision is we see a world in which kinship with all life prospers. And so to live in a world where every single plant, every animal, every person is actually thriving, they're allowed, their freedom to express and to grow and prosper is an amazing world. And if we look at this from sort of, quote, the scientific perspective from our dear friend Neil, he tells us that accepting our kinship with all life on earth is not only solid science. In his view, it's also soaring. It's a soaring spiritual experience. And, the key word that he's bringing out for me today is this notion of experience. So we are in fact, one would say, a lot of places in this world, we are actually prospering. We are truly prospering in many ways. We have, if we look at the industrial age that sort of helped to kick off all the prospering that's been done, we can now, we were talking on Friday about how the wagon wheels and people crossing the plains, and now you can go 80 miles an hour in a car. We are prospering in that way. We can look at all of our technology and how it's prospering. We can look at the medical advances. We're able to live much longer. From all of the sciences and the medicine and everything, we're prospering in that ways. We have ways in which to, in Western medical science, heal our bodies in ways that our grandparents and their parents couldn't even fathom, right? But one might take a little place out of where perhaps we're not prospering. And I sort of throw into the room this morning that, are our souls prospering? So when we're lacking that kinship with one another, and when we're cut off from our kin, we've sort of cut our kin off. Now, I'm not talking blood relatives, and yes, I am, but when we've cut off our kin, what happens? Well, what tends to happen, because our soul is perhaps not prospering, is we get to see how life outpictures that way. I was curious to see, in this year, approximately how many endangered species are there? Well, there's approximately 19,000 endangered species on this planet. And there's 4 in the top 10 right there. And 10 years ago, there were 10,000 less. So it seems to be, moving at a pretty rapid pace. When this song that Andrew sang, there's a line in there, and it says, we think we own the land. And we think Earth is just a dead thing we can claim. And so when we think we own the land and Earth is just this dead thing that we can claim, we do a lot of things to it. You know, we're cutting down most of the rainforests, and, you know, I could go on to a whole diatribe about just to raise cattle to feed because we want big steaks or whatever it is. And I know I'm in Dallas, Texas, but it's like, you know, we're doing things, right? We're doing things because we think we own the land. And the indigenous people, they don't think that way. So when we're not connected to our own soul, we sort of feel isolated. We feel alienated. We see that there are addictions in our lives. There's all kinds of violence on TV. There's the media. They love to hypnotize us that we just don't have enough and we need more. And I could go on and on and on, but that's not what the talk's about, thank goodness. You know, when we're disconnected from Mother Nature, from Gaia, we're losing part of our soul when we don't connect with that. Let's just think about what's going to happen in the summer here. Most of us are going to wake up in an air-conditioned place. We're going to go as fast as we can to our car to turn on the air conditioner, and we're going to drive somewhere in an air-conditioned car. And then we're going to get to work, and we'll step out of that car and into a workplace. And then we're going to go from workplace back to home. And we're rarely, you know, it's the Northwest has sort of the rainy blues. I think we have the hot summer blues, right? Because we're not going out in nature as much. So we've got to get back to our kinship with the universe. We've got to care for ourselves and one another. And the way to start this is to practice loving kindness. Now, the indigenous people are not the only ones to do this. The Buddhists do this. It's a spiritual practice, the practice of loving kindness. So I thought that we would start here together with this beautiful prayer of loving kindness. And I'm going to ask you to say this with me. So, may I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be happy. Let's do that again. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be happy. Amen, right? And so to not only take this prayer up for our own life, because it's a beautiful prayer to take up for our own selves, but we can pray for all of our other relations, all of the other relations that we have in this life, all of this, you know, unified web. And so now I invite us to take this up. And before you do, just think of people, think of animals, think of the grass, whatever. Just bring that into yourself, your beingness. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be happy. Now, perhaps whatever you took up in that first round, take something else up. Maybe it's another country or something. So let's take that up and send that out, this loving kindness out. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be happy. Yeah, may you be happy. So last week, if you were here, you were enamored, perhaps or not, you know, with this message about this whole talk about the intelligence of the universe. If you weren't enamored or you weren't here, watch the talk. It's, you know, on our website. And it was a very intellectual message. It was filled with lots of reasoning and logic. It was good stuff because reasoning and logic is good. It's very good, right? However, we can't stop at that point, reason and logic. So in order to have a world in which the kinship with all life prospers, we need to go beyond the intellect. We must go beyond this thing called reasoning and logic. And so when we move in the world from this just purely logic and reason standpoint, we're not bringing all of us into this place of loving kindness that we can. So when we're using intellect alone, I suspect that's what's bringing the challenges that we're seeing in the world today. From our book, Deep Spirit, Dr. De Quincey tells us, the problem with Western reasoning is that it thinks it's the whole story. But it is only a part, a very, very small part, he says, of the great story. The myth of reason is that in order to be right, it must conquer, negate, annihilate, or destroy all other stories. Stories, he says, and other ways of knowing. See, there's other ways of knowing that only logic and reason will annihilate, because you got to be right when you're using logic and reason, right? So there's this powerful way of knowing that we can experience, and that is the wisdom and the knowing through intuition. Our capacity to feel our relationship with the universe, and the ability to know without any process of reasoning whatsoever. This is what Deep Spirit says. It says there is a level of intellect and the level of intuition. You must listen and understand the first. You must feel and experience the second. Your job is to balance the two so that blending, understanding, and experience transports you to a whole new level of knowing. And Ernest Holmes gives us his view of intuition. He says there is intuition is God in man revealing to him the realities of being. Just as instinct guides the animal, so would intuition guide man if he would allow it to operate through him. The ability to know without any process of reasoning. That's what he says intuition is. And God knows only intuitively. So by allowing intuition to operate through us, we grow and we prosper in our own lives in a whole new way. And it's a way of knowing that one cannot measure. It cannot be measured, this divine knowing. And so in the Western world, we have the language. We've got the language of science and logic pretty down pat, wouldn't you say? Yeah. I got one amen up there. Thanks, Ann. We need to learn the language of the soul, that which connects us to all of life, and it's actually in the code of life. And it's a code that we can decipher, we can understand, and actually we can experience. And it's talked about in this incredible book that I know you're all going to go out and get now. It's a new code that we might not have heard about. It's called the Noetic Code. And he says, in this story, this whole book is a story and uses metaphors. So it says, what is the Noetic Code? Well, as you know, the genetic code is the language of the genes, the chemical blueprint for life. It's what makes a mouse, a man, a woman, a dolphin. There's a dolphin in this story. Great, named Darwin. You just got to get this book. It codes for grow thyself. That's the genetic code. Grow thyself. Okay? The Noetic Code, however, is the language of the soul. It guides the development of our interior life. It codes for know thyself. Where were you, Karen? Okay. One codes for growing, the other codes for knowing. And the noetic evolution is growing through knowing, right? So she asked, remind me again what noetic means? It's a kind of super intuition, a highly evolved state of consciousness. And he goes on to say that, mind you, this is Darwin, the dolphin. The noetic code translates the wisdom of the world's soul into messages we can understand in our own souls. It is a way of listening through sacred silence. We learn this code by feeling, not by figuring. The noetic code, then, is a key that unlocks the relationship between mind and body, between consciousness and matter. We talked about matter a lot last Sunday, right? And cracking the noetic code comes down to this. It is learning the language of love, knowing and living a profound interconnection. It is knowing ultimately that all is one. So, Deep Spirit weaves this beautiful story throughout the whole book, and it uses story because it's using story that intelligence, this whole story, that intelligence seeks expression. And it spends some time talking about that stories matter. But then it goes on to say that matter stories. I was really curious about that. Haven't y'all? Like, matter stories? What's matter stories? I know stories matter, but what's matter stories? Well, matter, the physical world actually has a lot of stories. And so this physical world writes and creates wisdom in these stories. So we have to learn to listen, and we have to learn to get this wisdom that takes us to this whole new area where we really understand our kinship with all of life. So again, the genetic code is grow thyself. The noetic code is the language of the soul, and it's know thyself. So through stories and metaphor, we can access this deep wisdom. We can begin to know thyself. And it's a great place that lends to many stories and metaphors. There's this one place. Can you guess what it is? There's this one place where there are a lot of stories and metaphors. Nature. Nature. I mean, there are a lot of places because we use stories in practically everything. But in nature. And so in Deep Spirit, it says, the intelligence, the deep wisdom of the world resides in nature. Matter itself tingles with the spark of spirit. All matter, including our bodies, the bodies of other animals, plants, rocks, mountains, and yes, the oceans too. So nature becomes this huge metaphor for us to begin to know how to experience spirit. The matter, the body of life. And metaphors can help us stay connected and most importantly, reconnect us to this intuitive way of feeling. And I know all of you have felt this intuitive way of feeling. I just wonder how often it comes up in your lives. How easy is it for you to experience it and tap into it? So, let's just take a couple. I want you to begin to imagine a stream. Any stream that you've seen in your life, just begin to imagine that stream, wherever it is. Well, the metaphor for a stream is that stream teaches us about the flow of life. We hear it. There's even a song, The River of Life, flows through me. So this stream, water in that form, teaches us about the flow of life. Well, there's also water. If we look at water in a stream or in a river and it comes upon a big rock, what happens with it? It goes around, it goes over it, it might even go under it if it has a place. Nothing stops that water. It just goes so quickly around that obstacle, and that's a metaphor that we can move around anything by tapping into this thought of water. Water teaches us wisdom. It teaches us a wisdom we may not have. And so this whole thing about nature and this kinship with all of life is helping us understand this manifest body of God, this one thing, right? Let's look at the words of the Disney song again. Come roll in the all, catching my breath. Come roll in the all, the riches all around you. For once, never wonder what they're worth. The rainstorm and the river are my brothers. We are all connected to each other in a circle, in a hoop that never ends. What a beautiful metaphor that is, right? Ernest Holmes tells us that, but the person who goes deeply into his or her own nature will find that God speaks in a language more subtle than the human language, without a tongue, in that universal language of spiritual emotion, which is instinctive in humanity and in brute and held in common by all civilization, by all creation, by all people who have lived. This universal language of emotion, sense, feeling, intuition, and instinct. I didn't hear reason and logic in there. Sometimes we call it conscious. Sometimes we call it a hunch. Sometimes we call it a vision, a dream. It makes no difference what we call it. He says it's a direct revelation of omniscience through us. Omniscience, all-knowing. So there is this universal language of spiritual emotion that is common to each and every one of us, and it is in nature. So this intelligence through nature is speaking to us, and we will learn and experience things that we cannot any other way. In deep spirit, again, she's talking about this, and who she is, I'd have to look, Maya. Maya's talking about this. She says, the intelligence that seeks expression is in the world, in the animals, in the plants, in the stones, in the mountains, rivers, lakes, and oceans. You no longer understand that language, she's telling us. We do. You have to find out who's the we. Without us to teach you, the stones will remain silent for you. The seas will keep their secrets, and the skies will never talk. That lost wisdom is what can save your world. So we could save our world by ensuring that logic and reason is coupled with this divine wisdom called intuition. See, nature allows us to access this deep wisdom, and we can tune into it, but most importantly, when it happens at the grandest times in our life, it tends to be an experience, not something we read about, an experience. So I want to share an experience with you that I had that changed my life. I was in Oahu, the one and only time I've been, and I was with a friend, and we were on our way to the North Shore. And along the way, we decided to rent a snorkel, a mask, and some fins. And when we got to the beach, she was actually much of a beach lover, so all she wanted to do was lay on the beach. Well, I just put my stuff down and I went for a walk on the beach. And when I turned the corner on this beach, I saw this massive, massive sea turtle up on the shore, and two people were standing on either side of it. And my immediate thought from afar was, that turtle has to be dead. Did not know sea turtles come up and rest on the shore. Did y'all know that? I didn't. So I'm like, I almost didn't want to go over because I was afraid I was going to see a big dead sea turtle. And so I went over and I'm like, oh, goodness. And they could tell. I was like, oh, no. And they were like, oh, no, she's just resting. I was like, oh, really? And in that flash, beyond any reason, everything in me said, actually, I didn't even hear it. I just went. It was like, go. And I ran as fast as I could to go get my snorkel and fins and mask. I still don't know why to this day. And I ran all the way back. I mean, I was out of breath. And I didn't go to the sea turtle. I went into the water. Now, she had her back to me. She was not facing the ocean. And the moment I got my feet wet, she started turning. And it was like we were looking at one another, and she just starts coming down towards the ocean. And as she started coming down, I started going deeper and deeper. And I kept getting deeper and deeper as she was coming into the rocks of the water. And finally, I got into enough water where I could start the float with my snorkel. And I'm telling you, when she got in that water, she was right here. Right here. I could have touched her. And when that happened, and I looked at her eye, and she looked at my eye, hard to describe beyond words, the whole universe fell away. It was gone. I was in this timeless, nothingness, vastness that I had never seen, nor experienced, nor felt. And it was just me and God. That sea turtle was like this divine spirit. And I had a sense of oneness. You know, this thing that we talk about, and we try to logic and reason in it. I had an experience of oneness that has never left me. It's still in my body. I can feel myself in the water with this beloved being. And so, again, everything had fallen away, and especially time. And we had this experience one another. Now, remember, I'm snorkeling. That means she has to stay at a certain level for me to breathe, right? The whole time. And I think, I'm guessing, after the third or fourth breath where she came up, because she too had to breathe, as she came up the third or fourth time, I sort of got some sorts of sense of time and space again, and I thought, I wonder where I am. And when I popped my head up and looked, I was at least a half a mile from the shore. And I was like, how am I going to get back? Because now I'm like back in my body and, you know, and like, oh. And it was the hardest thing to do because as soon as I put my head back under, there we were again. And it was we were connected. I was like one with all of life. And it really, truly was the hardest thing to do to say, I got to go. But I took much time to say thank you. You know, I got the impact of in my life of this experience. And the moment I looked in that turtle's eyes without language and said, thank you, she dove straight down into the depths, and I never saw her again. So that was that experience that goes way beyond reason, that taught me this wisdom, this thing called oneness that I've been able to, actually at times, quite honestly, when I don't feel my oneness with life, I go back with that sea turtle in a flash. So we can have this at any moment's notice. We can have it through the metaphor of nature. So I want to invite you to just sort of close your eyes and just imagine you're not sitting in this room for a minute. Actually, open your eyes. Sorry. This is one of the pictures I took from this place called 11 Mile Lake. And truly one of the most gorgeous places on the planet, I'm going to guess. And the Continental Divide's in the background, but you've got some mountains there. So just sort of take that in, or take your own mountain range that you've seen or walked on or seen a picture of, and take that within. And I want you to begin to listen to see if you can hear the voices of the mountains. And hear what they're saying. And then feel the breeze that now comes in that's blowing across you. And imagine that you can paint. You can paint your life with all the colors of the wind. Take the brush and paint your life with the colors of the wind. It goes beyond reason. And then when you're ready, come back in. See, it's time to call not only the intellect in, it's time to call the intuition that we all have in. And by doing so, when we call it in, when we put ourselves in places where we can have experiences, when we put ourselves in places where we can have experiences, we can have it right out in the parking lot under that tree. We don't have to fly to Colorado Springs. We can have it right there. When we do that, we remember who and what our kin is. And we come back into that kinship with all of life. And De Quincey does a really great job in summing that up by saying, with the proper balance between instinct and intellect, people can retrain themselves to live in a very different way, where the paranoia of competition is replaced by a more humane spirit of cooperation, where obsession with progress at any cost is replaced by a realistic respect for conservation, where aggression is replaced by tolerance, where dogma takes a back seat to dialogue, where power and greed are less attractive than service and contribution, where the intelligence and evolution is given full expression, where science is no longer at odds with the sacred. I read an interview where Richard Gere talks about his daily Buddhist practice that he started many, many years ago. And he said that no matter what he was doing, where he was going, who he met along the way, he would bring into his whole beingness when he met someone or wherever he was going, albeit a blade of grass, a dog, a cow, a person. Whenever he came in contact, he inside himself said, "I wish you happiness." Imagine if when we came into and seen someone from afar before we came up to them, before the judgments or whatever else will start, we look at how good their shoes are shining or what their watch is blinging at or whatever. We start with, "I wish you happiness." He says that he starts that way. It's like this moving, continual prayer. I wish you happiness. I believe if we were willing to take that up for 1 week, just this week, before we come back together again next Sunday, everything that we met when we walk out and see that tree or the plant on the side table or each other, we say inside ourselves, "I wish you happiness." I bet we would feel and experience a kinship with all of life in a whole new way. And when we feel the kinship with life, our life prospers. And when our life prospers, all of life prospers. And the other thing I'm going to invite you to do, because 2 days felt like a week, I'm going to invite you to go out in nature. You know, everything practically in nature in the parks in Dallas, there's some amazing places. I moved here from the Bay Area. And people are like, "How are you hanging in Dallas?" I had to find every park I could find. And almost all of them are free. So we can go from our air-conditioned car, but then get out in nature. So I invite you to do that this week. Do that as well. Ernest Holmes tells us that when we experience that we are united with all, the presence of spirit within you blesses everyone you meet, tends to heal everything you touch, brings gladness into the life of everyone you contact. Therefore, you are a blessing to yourself, to humankind, and to the day in which you live. And so what I would love for us to do is, Andrew's going to come up and play a little bit more of that incredible song, and then we're going to do another Buddhist prayer for the world as our prayer for today. So just be with this.
Come run the hidden pine trails of the forest. Come taste the sun-sweet berries of the earth. Come roll in all the riches all around you, and for once never wonder what they're worth. The rainstorm and the river are my brothers. The heron and the otter are my friends, and we are all connected to each other in a circle, in a hoop that never ends. Have you ever heard the wolf cry to the blue corn moon, or ask the grinning bobcat why he grins? We need to sing with all the voices
each have a place that's very sacred to you in nature. Just bring that into your soul. Connect with it. Feel it. Experience it. Right in this room. And then you bring that wisdom and that connection through you as I invite us all to say this prayer for all of life. May all beings be peaceful. May all beings be happy. May all beings be safe. May all beings awaken to the light of their true nature. May all beings be free. Let's say it again. May all beings be peaceful. May all beings be happy. May all beings be safe. May all beings awaken to the light of their true nature. May all beings be free. Be free. And so it is.